Hey guys, this is Paige from Very Paige, back again with a little sewing project. I'm sewing up the York Pinafore here by Helen's Closet. It is an awesome little pattern that I'm going to make like 800 more of, so I hope you stick around and see how it ends up. I'm using a linen look fabric from Joann's. Originally I thought the linen look meant that it was a polyester blend, but looking at the end of the bolt recently, I realized that it's a linen rayon blend, and I love rayon, so I'm going to definitely be using it a lot more. I will say, because there is rayon in it, rayon continues to shrink no matter what, so you just have to be careful on how you're washing it. I also shorted myself a little bit for the pocket, which happens, and I just had to go to Joann's and buy some more fabric to cut out the second pocket. I'm going to be sewing this up on my Singer Heavy Duty. I'm waiting on a belt for my Janome machine, so I don't want to use it while it's making this horrible noise. But here I am stay stitching the neckline on the jumper. You want to do this so that it doesn't stretch out before you apply the bias tape. It just helps it keep its shape, especially helpful on curves and bias cuts. This is included in the pattern. Kind of boring to show, you just stitch within the seam allowance in the neckline and armholes, but a very important step, especially if you want your garment to not look wonky. You can also see my wig in the corner for a photo shoot that I'm doing. Should be up on my other channel soon if you're interested. Alright, here I am. I'm doing a little pin fitting. I realized that I needed to take it in a little bit on the waist area, and so I kind of just pinned it on my body, and then I'm going to make it so that the pin line is my new stitch line, and I'm going to mark out the 5/8 seam allowance and just trim off the excess. It worked out pretty well. The first step in the process here is to apply the bias tape to the pockets to finish the pockets. Now on the pockets, I only folded the bias tape over once, and you'll see me in a minute kind of futzing with deciding if I wanted to double it or just fold it over once. It laid a little bit flatter on the pockets, and I thought that it looked better, but for the armhole and the necklines, it was really just way too wide to fold it over once, so I did fold it over twice like the instructions showed you. I just thought it looked a little bit nicer, and you'll see me kind of right here decide like what I want to do. Do I want to fold it over twice? Do I want to fold it over once? And I think I just went with once because it looked a little smoother. And I don't mind a little bit more of a pattern on the pockets if it peeks out. I think it's kind of cute. Also, please notice my very, very jerry-rigged iron situation. I was feeling extra lazy, so I just took the cookie sheet that I used for my polymer clay, threw a folded up tea towel over it, and ironed the majority of my project on that. Also worked out for filming a little bit better, so I didn't have to like reposition the camera every time I wanted to go to the ironing board. And I'm just stitching that bad boy down. And this bias tape is from Fabergé, my local fabric store. It's super cute. It's a little floral peak on a very solid pinafore, which I thought was fun. My craft room is an absolute disaster, but we're actually getting ready to move it, so I'm not picking it up until I have to move it. Now you're going to want to turn in the seam allowances in the pockets. They are patch pockets, so the seams need to be turned in beforehand. Here I am marking it, and I think I am going to pink the edges so that they don't fray. It didn't say how to finish the seam allowance in the pockets. I could have serged it, but I really like these scalloped pinking shears that I have, so any chance I get to use them, I definitely do. So just finish your seam allowance, and then you're going to want to turn it in and give it a good pressing. You guys know that I am team iron press every time, every step. It just makes your garments look that much better. And I'm normally not a huge pin person, but for curves, I find you need to use pins. There's no way around it. And because I pinked the curves and the seam allowance, it turns in much easier. It's almost like clipping. So you know how you clip your seam allowance so that the curve lays flatter. Pinking kind of gives it a little bit more leeway when it comes to curving. And just really press that down because you really don't want it shifting around when you're top stitching it. And of course you'll repeat this for the second pocket, but there's no reason for me to show it to you twice. Now you're going to place your pockets where you want them. I realized that I didn't put the markings in, so I kind of just eyeballed it, but I placed them a little bit low. I think next time I make this, I'm going to place them a little bit higher. But you just pin that on, and you're basically going to top stitch it down. It's super easy. I top stitched really close to the edge of the pocket. I would say it was even more of an edge stitch than a top stitch. And I did the fun little triangle stop guide to reinforce the seam at the top of the pocket. You know, for this machine being as cheap as it is, I really like it. And the one I bought was from an open box store, and the threader bars definitely broke, and I can't ever really center the needle. So I've been considering buying a new one just as my backup machine. It's been really helpful while my main machine has been out of commission. There's that little triangle stop. It looks really cute too. There you go. See it? Look how cute. How reinforced. You're going to sew your side seams and your shoulder seams. I used French seams as I normally do because I bought a serger, and why ever use it, right? So I'm not going to show you the French seam process, but just know if you see anything weird, it's because I'm doing French seams. And again, before you do French seams or before you finish your seams, if you didn't do a pin fitting like I did, you're going to want to try it on once you stitch it up. I always recommend a pin fitting, even if it's, you know, a little bit more complicated like this, especially if it's as simple as this pattern. And you can kind of see. Now, this is why you do fitting beforehand, because I realized that the hip curve is a little bit big for my hips. I'm not well endowed in the hips. I mean, I've got a butt, I've got boobs and a belly, but no hips really to speak of. So next time I make it, I need to reduce the hip curve as well as taking in the waist. And I'm even using a ham because it does have a really intense hip curve. So if you are more slim hipped, that is something you definitely want to keep an eye out with this pattern. And for side seams, I use my real ironing board because I didn't have a cookie sheet big enough. But the cookie sheet and the towel actually worked out really, really well. And I love my pressing ham. I am just iron obsessed. I'm heavy on the steam, guys, but it makes a big difference. All right, now the most tedious part of this whole project is using the bias tape to finish the neckline and armholes. I love bias tape. It's definitely what I used when I first started sewing, so it kind of feels like second nature to me at this point. I could put it on my sleeve. I will say that it takes a lot of bias tape. I think it's like 4 yards. I thought I got 4 yards, but maybe I got 3 yards because I definitely had to go back and get a whole nother yard. Maybe I was just too loosey-goosey in how much I was leaving to trim on the pockets, but I definitely ended up needing another yard. So I would say buy maybe a little bit more bias tape than you think you need, especially if it's a super cute pattern stuff that you just lucked out that they still had a tiny bit left at your local fabric store. Even better, maybe get like a half yard and just make your own so that you can just make more if you need it. But I just applied the bias tape the same way I did in the pocket, but instead of turning it in once, I turned it in twice, as the pattern recommends. If I only had turned it in once, I would have got an overlap on my top stitching on the sleeve since they are so thin, and it would have been a really wide sleeve finish. On the pockets, I think it looked great, but not so much here. So you're about to see lots of stitching because it's got big old armholes and a real deep neck. But in the end, I think the finish is nice, and the facing is probably a little too much for a garment this simple, but it's up to you. You could definitely use facing. You could definitely fully line the garment. I've been toying with like making one that's reversible because I literally wore this for like 5 days after I sewed it. It has huge pockets. It's great on photo shoots. I definitely looked like a elementary school art teacher and had kids approach me in the street much more. But I mean, my style is just elementary school art teacher. As much as I try to fight it, there's no getting around it. And again, press, use steam, use a heavy iron, get that crisp line, because what's the point of making something that looks like crap? But I'm sure some people think my stuff looks like crap too, so make what you like, but iron it well. Lots of pins, just because I don't want anything shifting. Bias tape can have a tendency to pull out if you don't pin it really well and pucker weird, so just make sure you're taking your time. This is a simple project. For simple projects, why not work on your finishing? There's no point in like churning something out if the finishing isn't nice. The hem I did take up, I think, an inch more than it recommended, and I'm gonna do the shorter version next time. I'm fairly tall in comparison to an average woman. I'm about 5'8", so I think that you should really check the hem length on your body. It definitely was below the knee for me, which is fine, but I think it might look better above the knee, and I still took it up more than is recommended by the pattern. So it's just a double turned hem. The second turn is a little bit thicker than the first one. Don't know why, but it turned out okay. So just follow the instructions here. I did like the instructions on this pattern. They turned out really well. Normally I would catch stitch a hem just because I think it moves a little bit better, but I definitely didn't do that here. Probably because I was being lazy and I just wanted to get it done. I was on day 2 of sewing because I'd been taking my time with finishes on a really simple project that I expected to get out in a couple hours. But that bias tape, it takes a minute, so don't stress out about it. And I actually really like the cookie sheet now that I'm looking at myself use it. And I just top stitched right by the edge. Not my straightest of stitching, but it worked fine. Here it is on me. Very elementary school art teacher, I know, but I loved it and I wear it all the time. I might add a center back seam and do a sway back adjustment just because I think there's a little bit above my lower back that could come out. But I think it's fun and I hope you enjoyed. Please comment, like, subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and let me know if you want to see more sewing videos and what you'd like to see me sew. Thank you. Bye.